Good morning, YouTube. Wobbles on a lot here on Sunday, the 1st of November 2020, and we are looking directly west across a cubic sundial. And as you can see, the moon is about to set, and the moon is setting, well, maybe about 10 degrees to the north of west. Here we're looking at the south face of the dial. And you can almost see a bit of a shadow on the western side. As we continue to come down, we can see a spirit level, showing that the tabletop is in fact level. And with a magnetic variation of 11 degrees to the east, we can see that the tabletop and the sundial is pointing true north. Ooh, you can nearly see a bit of a shadow there as well. At 5:45 in the morning, daylight saving time. And now we're looking due east. Looking across the cubic sundial. Six minutes later, it's a whole lot brighter. Looking out to the east and to the west, we can see that the moon is pretty close to being down on the horizon there behind the trees. 7 minutes past 6 in the morning. And if you look in the centre of the frame, behind the tree kind of thing, there's a little faint white light. And that is the moon. About there, off the end of my fingertip. And the moon is definitely touching down north of west, because the faces on the cube are pointing north-south and east-west. There you go. I've moved off to the north, and you can see the moon touching the horizon. There you see my observational set up. Okay, moon down. At approximately 9 minutes past 6. And as you can see, the moon has set north of west. And now we wait for sunrise, which should be over there somewhere in the east. Once again, the cube is pointing north, south and east, west for reference. Out there, the sun has started to rise on the lowlands, which are not quite so close to the top of the ridge. But here we're still in the shade at 13 minutes past 6. The sunshine is creeping closer. And we can just about see that the eastern horizon is starting to get bright over about there off the end of my finger. To the south of due east. And we have the first glimmerings of sunshine. There, starting to come through the trees. And once again, I reiterate, the sun is rising south of due east. See if I can just... There you see the sun winking through the trees. At 19 minutes past 6. "21 past 6 and we have sun rays beaming straight down the lens. There we have it. We have the sun shining south of east. And I am 30 degrees south of the equator. Shadows are commencing to form. And you can start to read the south vertical dial. Which tells us that it's 6 o'clock. Local apparent time. Isn't that cute? The east vertical dial also says it's 6 o'clock because it casts no shadow at all. Whereas the north facing dial, it's in shade, as is the west vertical dial. And there you can clearly see we're showing a couple of minutes past 6 on the south vertical dial, and we're showing just after 6 on the horizontal dial. Great things, cubic sundials, aren't they? The sun always shines on 2 faces, sometimes on 3. At the moment, we're getting 2 faces of the dial illuminated. There you see the shadow coming off the gnomon. You can't read that shadow because it doesn't line up with the hour lines. You can read that shadow. And that says it's about 3 minutes to 6. Whereas that one says it's a couple of minutes after 6. And that shadow there, it also says it's a couple of minutes after 6. Aren't sundials fun? Even the sheep are impressed. Oh, witchcraft, magic, so they say, as they run away. Now it says exactly 6 on the horizontal dial. As I have mentioned before, the dial indicates anti-clockwise because we're in the southern hemisphere. Clockwise is not dial-wise down here. And the south vertical dial, it also indicates dial-wise, which is anti-clockwise. And the east vertical dial, it shows how much to the south of the ecliptic the sun is by virtue of that little bit of shadow that's on the wood rather than on the dial. Everything's all still lined up. Now we're reading 6:15 on the south vertical dial. Almost 6:05 on the horizontal dial. And 6:15 on the east vertical dial. Probably not going to show out on the camera, but with the human eye you can just barely read. Oh yeah, you can. You can read all 3 dials at once. And now the next point of interest will be to see how long we get a reading on the south vertical dial. Because shortly, directly, in due course, we're going to lose the illumination on the south dial and we're going to gain illumination on the north vertical dial, and then we'll be looking at 3 dials again. There'll be a brief interlude where we've only got 2 dials being readable. Not that it helps that the sunlight is filtered through tree branches and a little bit of early morning fog, indicating 22 minutes past 6 on the south vertical dial, indicating 15 minutes past on the horizontal dial, and almost half past 6 on the east vertical dial. 20, 25, and 30. So you average the figures and you get 25 past 6. 1 sundial is good. 3, damn, it gives almost precision. South vertical dial showing half past 6. Lithium titanium solar powered sundial showing 7 minutes to 7. Horizontal dial showing 22 minutes past 6. East vertical dial showing about 32 minutes past. And we've still got a readable shadow on the south vertical dial. Quite a good one, actually. And as the sun climbs out of the tree branches, the horizontal dial and the south vertical dial are actually quite easy to read. You just need direct sunlight. But you know, I live in the mountains, and some of the mountains to the east of me are sort of high enough that the trees can cause a problem. And as you can see, the north vertical dial is still entirely shaded. And the east vertical dial it's doing its thing too, saying that it's about 35 minutes past 6. In agreement with the south vertical dial. While the horizontal dial is running a couple of minutes slow. And the precision all comes down to how carefully and how accurately the cube has been made. Now the south vertical dial is starting to get a little bit hard to read, comparatively speaking, as we come up to 9 minutes past 7. Local daylight saving time, whereas local apparent time is 6:45 on the south vertical dial, on which the shadow is growing faint. The horizontal dial says it's about 22 to 7. And the east vertical dial says it's about 5 to 7. And the north vertical dial is almost about to start reading. That shot pretty much shows how the south vertical dial is fading as the sun moves further and further north in the sky. The east and west vertical dials are arranged so that on the equinox the shadow of the gnomon tracks perfectly along the white length of the dial. On the summer solstice, the shadow of the gnomon tracks along one edge marking, and it overhangs similar degree on the north side. So the shadow is displaced north as the sun gets further and higher overhead, sort of thing. Whereas on the winter solstice, the shadow of the gnomon is displaced south because the sun has moved further north in the sky. And the gnomon is the part of the sundial which knows what the time is, and the edge of the gnomon which casts the shadow which tells the time, that's called the style. So we have the gnomon, we have the style, and the style casts the shadow which tells us the time, which is 12 minutes to 7. According to the horizontal dial, about 1 minute to 7 according to the east vertical dial, and about 2 minutes to 7 according to the south vertical dial. I just came up with a good way to visualise things. On the equinox, the shadow of the gnomon runs like that. Summer solstice, winter solstice. Equinox, summer solstice, winter solstice. So now we're looking at 7 o'clock. On the eastern vertical dial. If you look hard and you really pay attention, yeah, you can just still see a shadow on the south vertical dial. It's not horribly readable, but it suggests 7 o'clock, 5 to 7. There you go. South vertical face is almost unreadable. 7 o'clock, pre-exactly. You can just barely read that says 7 o'clock. And this one says about 5 past 7, maybe 7 past 7. Easier to actually see that shadow on the wood than it is on the liquid paper and Sharpie of the dial. Horizontal dial reads 7:15. South vertical dial unreadable. East vertical dial reads 20 past 7. North vertical dial not yet readable. "22 minutes past 7. And what have we got here? Just starting to read 7:15 on the north vertical face. Calling 7:25 on the east vertical face. 7:30 on the north vertical dial. 7:30 on the horizontal dial. At 7:35 on the east vertical dial. Nothing at all on the south vertical dial, which did in fact tell us the time for about an hour and a half this morning. So at this time of year it's good for 3 hours a day. This technology is not new. I think late 1600s, early 1700s is when cubic sundials were cutting edge technology. And the reason I got up at 5 o'clock this morning on the full moon so that I could show you the moon going down north of west and the sun rising south of east, so that you could see the cubic sundial telling the time here 30 degrees south of the equator, telling the time on its south vertical face, is because I want you to ponder the question of whether a cubic sundial can ever function within a flat earth model or a flat earth theory, if the earth was flat. And it's difficult to actually point your finger and wag your tongue if all you've got is a cubic sundial to look at. So I'll just go and get a map that I have previously prepared. Hello, Felix. Would you like some bread? How about you, Mrs. Whitetail? And of course, the reason for including some wildlife is simple. Swamp wallabies and kangaroos and pied currawongs are a really good way to demonstrate that I am in fact living 30 degrees south of the equator, 151 degrees east of Greenwich. Because kangaroos and swamp wallabies and currawongs come to share my breakfast. Bit like a cubic sundial. It's hard to fake swamp wallabies on the lawn. So, having nailed down which continent I'm standing on, we can zero in just north of Glen Innes. And that's where we actually are. So if we then come across, we find that that's 30 degrees south. So we're 29.5 degrees south, because that's 28 degrees south. 29, 29.5, 30 degrees south, and 152 degrees east. So for all practical purposes, I generally tell people that I'm 30 south, 150 east, which puts me not quite accurate location out there near Balata in the Mount Capitar National Park. But anyway, this is where we really are. 29.5 south, 152 east. Oh, look at that. It shows where we are on the globe. Shows it rather better than my globe shows my location, which would be approximately thereabouts. Okay, so having established where I am and having had breakfast, and having established that we're still in the land of the kangaroo, what I propose to do now is walk back to the cubic sundial in one uninterrupted take, so nobody can claim that I've shot the kangaroo videos in one location and edited it or spliced it in or done some other photoshoppery. It's all happening in the one location. We are in fact 30 degrees south of the equator. Excusez-moi. If we weren't 30 degrees south of the equator, then the east and west vertical sundials, the shadow wouldn't run in the groove, so to speak, as I demonstrated earlier. No doubt there are theoretically better places where I could have set up on top of a hill with nothing between me and the horizons, but getting there at 5 o'clock in the morning would have been a bit difficult. This little setup, we got an almost clear view of the sunrise, and almost clear view of the moon set. And here we are, back to see the east vertical dial reading at 4 minutes to 9. North vertical reading about 10 minutes to 9. And our horizontal is reading 20 minutes to 9. So yeah, roughly roundabout. In an earlier video I made the assertion that sundials can't possibly work on flat earth, and in the comments thread a few flat earth protagonists said that I was crazy. I just used what they called planar geometry to fool myself, and they said that of course a sundial can work on a flat earth. And I thought about it, and yeah, well, it can sort of seem as if it's working if you live in a high enough northern latitude, and we'll get into that shortly. But in the making of a map of flat earth we run into a few problems. Is one making a map of a Platonic or Ptolemaic snow dome type of a flat earth? Is one mapping a Terry Pratchett style of a disc world? Or is one trying to map a Gleason type flat earth where you've got an Antarctic ice wall running around the rim of it? Well, I decided to go for a Gleason version. As I said, your flat earth map sort of almost works if you're an ancient Greek and this is your frame of reference of the universe. But as soon as you expand it out and start looking at anywhere south of the equator, everything's just completely pushed out of shape. And we know what shape everything actually is because people have sailed from Australia to South America, and it's not anywhere near that distance. However, for the purposes of this discussion, where we're only talking about whether a sundial can function on a flat earth, here's how we're going. This is where we are. 30 south, 150 east, roughly, more or less. And yes, that's the shape Australia would be if the Gleason model of flat earth holds true. With the Antarctic Circle, Tropic of Capricorn, Equator, Tropic of Cancer, Arctic Circle. Okay, now earlier on in the video this morning I showed you with a cubic sundial, I showed you the sun rising to the south of the line that runs east-west. That's what that circumference of latitude would do on a flat earth. It would be a circle, a straight line circularly running from west to east. And I showed you the sun rising south of east. However, in a flat earth view of the universe, their theory is that the sun and the moon are not respectively about 100,000 times bigger than the Earth and 1/3 the size of the Earth. They're both relatively small, maybe 1,000 miles in diameter, and they're both relatively low. And according to the flat earth theory, when people in England, for example, are in summertime, then the sun, here shown to be about 1,000 miles in diameter, now that's 2,000 miles high, so that's probably only a 500 mile diameter sun. That sun is considered to be circling once every 24 hours around the Tropic of Cancer. On the equinox, it takes 24 hours to roar around the equator. In England or Northern Hemisphere's winter solstice, it takes 24 hours to run around the big circle. Does that sort of make sense? Kinda? Sorta? Okay, so also according to the doctrine of the flat earthers, the moon is about the same size as the sun. And the moon is also, in this case, 2,000 miles above the surface of the flat earth. Whoops, sit still. When I made this, I wasn't visualising having 20 mile an hour wind to contend with. And while the sun, it goes all the way around the world once every 24 hours, the moon, it goes all the way around once every 23 hours and 12 minutes. So the moon moves faster than the sun. And the moon doesn't actually go over the Tropic of Cancer or the Tropic of Capricorn, but it does go north and south of the equator, and we saw that this morning when we watched the moon setting north of due west. Okay, so if somebody was living in England and they're looking south to their equator, are they going to see the sun rise in the east and set in their west? Well, maybe, perhaps. Let's just consider it though. How can they get to see the sun set on a flat earth? So when it's summer in Britain and their sun is high in the sky because it's close to them, going round and round the Tropic of Cancer, that's as high as it gets, and their moon is as low as it gets. My question is, when it's night time, when you look at it from a flat earth, everywhere on earth, you're going to be able to see the sun in the sky. At most, it'll be half as high as the moon. So as far as I'm concerned, if the flat earth theory says that that's what the sun is going to look like as it moves in its low circle, whereas, just fighting the wind here, this is what the moon is going to look like in the northern hemispherian summer. I don't see how they're going to get a sundial to work at all. And when you give it a go from my location, sink down like water, assuming its own level, well, you can sort of more or less contrive to say that yes, this morning the moon set north of west. Don't know that it set quite that far north of west, and that's pretty much where the moon is at the moment. Maybe there, perhaps. Okay. But that's only when looked at from above. looked at from beyond the edge of the flat earth, the moon never ever got low enough over the flat earth to have set at all this morning. Whereas right at the moment, this is what the picture looks like on the flat earth table. And that's what the picture looks like in the sky. And here, from my position, visually, for the sun to have risen sufficiently far south of due east-west on the radial grid of flat earth, the sun would have been out here south of the South Pole, beyond the Antarctic ice rim wall. Yet this morning, earlier on in the video, you guys all saw the sun when aligned with true north. This morning I showed you a south vertical sundial functioning 30 degrees south of the horizon. The east vertical dial now says it's 9:45 in the morning, and as I explained to you, this shadow is going to run parallel down there, and this one's going to run parallel down there. Quarter to 10. And not quite quarter to 10, but essentially three faces in agreement. Average the three figures and you get a correct local apparent time. The sun had to rise south of east in order to shine on the south face of the dial, and the moon was seen to set north of west. Okay, so now we see the globe correctly oriented, showing the relative position in order to capture the actual sun in the actual sky. In this position, the globe is functioning like an astrolabe. But as you can see, I've got the equator parallel with the perpendicular to the ecliptic. Don't often see that, do you? Most of your normal, average, everyday people, even here in the southern hemisphere, they display their model globes upside down. And of course, before we call a halt to this, there's one more mysterious issue for the flat earthers to solve, and that is during my summer, when the sun is nearly virtually directly overhead at 7 degrees north of the zenith in my summer, and the moon is roaring around here, and the moon's going faster than the sun because of the 23 hours 12 minutes to circle the earth once for the moon and 24 hours to circle the earth once for the sun. As we move to the vernal and autumnal equinoxes, the moon and the sun are going to be on the exact same track at the exact same height, and they're the exact same size, but the moon is 48 minutes faster than the sun every day, so it's going to catch up. Nobody quite explains that, as the moon goes out to what for me, whoops, is its winter position, summer position. No, for me, moon is low on the horizon in winter. In summer, in winter the moon's high so you can see to get around at night time, and the sun is going to be low on the horizon. But how this mysterious transition occurs without the moon and the sun bashing into each other, no flat earther has ever explained that one to me. We'll allow them to ignore the navigational difficulties of getting around the southern hemisphere, but I really don't see how they can get away from the fact that anywhere on the flat earth you're going to be able to see the sun and the moon all day and all night, because if it's a perfectly flat earth, then a couple of thousand miles, or even the lowest estimate I've heard is somebody who said that the sun and the moon were only 500 miles vertically up, you're still going to see it. I mean, the tallest mountain, Mount Everest, is like 29,000 feet. 6 miles. You're not going to get a night with no sun. You're not going to get a day with no moon. You can't get your sundial, particularly a cubic sundial, to work in the southern hemisphere. And even a simple horizontal sundial, I can't see how it's going to function in the northern hemisphere of a flat earth. Oh, look at that. It's 10 o'clock. North vertical. It's 9:45 horizontal, and it's 10 o'clock east vertical. So if you average that, we'll call it 3 minutes to 10. 10 o'clock, horizontal dial. A couple of minutes past 10, north vertical dial. 5 past 10, east vertical dial. 10:15 on the Capuchin sundial. I gotta say that Capuchin dial is not real good on a windy day. Your pendulum spends too much time bobbing up and down. But given a dead calm and a clear blue sky, and if you know what your latitude is, then yeah, Capuchin dial's pretty good. Cubic sundial, before chronometers, these were the bee's knees, the best thing you could come up with. And the globe is not only the only way we can reconcile known travel times, it's also the only way we can reconcile the fact that sundials really do work and they tell the time. And sundials are not ever going to work with a 500 mile diameter sun, a 500 mile diameter moon, both of them anywhere from 1,000 miles to 5,000 miles above the surface of the earth. Because on Discworld or a Gleasonian flat earth or a Platonic or Ptolemaic or Socratic snow globe type earth, then your cubic sundial's not going to work in the southern hemisphere. Quod Erat Demonstrandum. This was to be proved. When flat earth theory meets a sundial, let alone 5 of them on one cube, The sundial wins. Flat Earth is not a thing. And though I don't usually indulge in daytime drinking, I've been at this for 5.5 bloody hours straight today. That's not counting the several hours map making last night, several hours on another day putting the bit of paper together and drawing the concentric circles. And yeah, I reckon Flat Earth versus sundials, the sundials have won. In my opinion, for whatever that's worth, sundials represent the definitive backyard experiment with which anybody can prove to themselves or to anybody else that we live on an oblate spheroid. Our oblate spheroid is circled by a moon 1/3 the size of the spheroid we live on, and we circle around a continuous hydrogen fusion reaction from which all our light emanates. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. I'm sorely tempted to end this video here. I'm also sorely tempted to try and keep the phone held in jump cut phase on the pause button and come back here in 2 hours time and tediously show you the shadows moving from the east vertical dial to the west vertical dial. But I think on balance, 5 hours into the stretch, 5.5 hours, I reckon I'm going to let you imagine what the next crossover is. You've seen one transition. You've seen the south vertical transition to the north vertical. You can stumble the principles. I've pointed my finger and wagged my tongue and warbled through all of the various issues and factors that I wanted to on the tabletop. I reckon relax, relax, relax. So against my temptation to make the perfect video showing sunrise, well, moonset, sunrise, midday, with a transition from south face to north face, then another transition from east face to west face, and then with sunset followed by moonrise. There's also the awareness that warbling on for too long is a thing. One risks labouring the point until it maybe breaks off under further hammering if one attempts, to quote Shakespeare, to be so foolish as to gild fine gold or attempt to paint the perfect surface of the lily, which in a common malapropism is often head foreshortened into people speaking of foolish attempts to gild the lily. Pretty sure you can buy gilded lilies. Electroplated gold covered lily petals, manufactured by somebody who didn't understand the Shakespearean quote because they got it in an abbreviated form. Anyway, I'll probably kick myself for it later on, but I think this is a big enough effort. It's probably going to run to about the hour. And I really have covered everything. Everything I can imagine. Everything I failed to cover in the previous video, which I titled Cubic Sundial Totally Destroys Flat Earth Theory. Haven't really settled on what I'm going to call this. Maybe Flat Earth versus sundials. Flat Earth versus cubic sundial. Don't know. It doesn't really matter what I call it, because being a non-monetized channel and talking about flat earth, this video will be probably kettled by YouTube's algorithm, the one which avoids contentious topics. But anyway, been a fun movie to make. You know, I've had to line up a lot of ducks in the row. Even making the models of the sun and the moon, that was an interesting mission to go on. So smooth, really smooth. I think I'll call it a day on that. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Day drinking with Sundials. I gotta say, it would have been better without the bloody wind, and it would have been better without the clouds, but I got the sunrise I was after, and that's the important thing. This has, of course, been a mad scientist video. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. You have fun. Ciao.